Hello, everyone. This is We Got Your Six, and I'm joined again with Kentrina Jenkins, my co-host, and we're just absolutely excited to bring to the forum today John Dowe. You're a name that's synonymous with mefloquine and with the fight and with advocacy, and so we're really excited to have you come here and share your story. I know my world changed when I met you, so I think this is a great opportunity for people to meet John Dowe who haven't, or to touch base with you and to see what you're up to lately, John. I know big things are happening, so I'm going to just let you jump in and introduce yourself, and we'll go from there.
Thanks a lot for that, Marge. That was very warm-hearted introduction. I feel likewise. What I've quickly learned as I began this advocacy 6 years ago for mefloquine veterans and of the RCMP, Canadian Forces, and those currently serving, and first responders. I've learned that any great advocacy work involves a team, and you quickly joined onto that team, and lo and behold, we've had one heck of a force fighting for all those that suffer from Quinism, or the disease, the long-term disease of mefloquine poisoning or mefloquine toxicity. Thanks again for that, Marge. I'm really happy to be here. This long format that you have is exactly what's needed for those out there that are trying on their own to learn more about mefloquine and learning about the community that you guys have fostered and are curating as a group, to know that they're not alone out there. We are together in this.
You know what, Trina, you're going to agree with me. We've had a few chats about whether we were a little windy and whether that was too much at one time, but we don't believe that. We believe, like you, that it's food for those that are hungry and need the knowledge, and you spend an hour with us and you're going to get to know us, and that's what we just hope, that it's a safe, comfortable platform, right?
Yeah, we definitely had our doubts with that one too, because everyone's, always saying, like, have your videos, like, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, but it's like you just get so sick of these like little tiny clip-ins, and it's like I feel privileged over the past year to be able to have like long phone conversations with you both, or long video chats, or even like seeing you guys in person. And then it's like I feel like there's so many people that would want to be a fly on the wall to any conversation with either of you, right? Or with any of the awesome guests that we have. So I don't know, I see it pretty cool to like kind of grab a coffee and then, let's see what everyone has to say.
Yeah. And
have the coffee.
Right?
Exactly.
I'm boring with water today, but.
So thank you for that, John. It validates why we started this, and, just to be there for a while, and to maybe we brighten somebody's day with a little bit of information that they certainly needed, right? And we all know we needed it in the beginning, and so much new happens all the time. So I'm going to let you start to explain some of the things you've been up to. And I know, Trina, you've got some questions for him as well. So if there's anything we missed, John, that you have to tell us today, we're not, like you said, we're a little bit long-winded, but we want the message to get out. So
okay. So this will dovetail nicely with my first posting, my first broadcast for 2020. So for everybody also out there listening and learning, welcome to 2020. I can recap how 2019 went and where we are going in 2020. So if you missed it, in 2019, the law firms Howie Sexton Henry and Waddell Phillips have successfully lined up the first set of cases, legal cases. These are tort or individual cases, not class action. And that's important, and we'll go into that in a few more minutes. They have successfully lined up these cases and presented them to the Government of Canada. This is what happened in 2019. And there are a multitude of cases that are lined up behind that, ready to go, ready to enter court. These first few cases, the intent was to understand how the government would approach us. we are looking for a quick and timely resolution for compensation for those families in these lawsuits, if you're wondering what the lawsuits are for. Because we cannot get policy change in government, and government entities, VA, Canadian Armed Forces, and the Health Canada, had a pause there, to work together on outreach and acknowledgement that we exist and that we need an enrollment program to screen us. So we entered the legal realm. So these tort or individual cases are lined up, ready to go, and we got a government response. The 2019 government response was, well, okay, we understand you exist. We are going to defend, and we are going to bring in a pharmaceutical company, the pharmaceutical company responsible for manufacturing the drug and giving us the drug back when this all began in 1990 or 1991 for some of you. So this is where I'm going to address where we move in 2020 and why this is important. And this is why this format is so important for you all out there, because these issues are complex. They take time to unpack. And only a long format will allow us to draw or tease out all the components at play. And no quick video will do that, leaving you with gaps in your information. This is why we're here in the long format, right, Marj and Kentrina?
Exactly.
Absolutely. And then what I like about it too is that, you know, if you're advocating for these topics, you don't have to know everything, right? Like you can, it's like, and then like, so the first part of it is you don't have to know everything. You can always reach out to somebody else, and, you know, someone that knows exactly what's going on can say it. And then that also limits the rest of us, you know, like say in this instance, say John, that makes John not have to repeat it, you know, a million times. It's like, oh, great question. Here's a YouTube link, right?
As we archive these long format presentations for people, really diving deep into what's going on, it will be so valuable. So now, here's why this is wrong for the Canadian government to try to drag in the manufacturer as a co-defendant for each of these cases that we present. They tried this before in the United Kingdom recently. A couple of years ago, 2016, the United Kingdom was ahead of us in this. And they tried to bring Roche in at that time. And Roche was quite explicit and successful in their defense, stating, and this applies to us now, they were always upfront with what was wrong with the drug and what the side effects were, what might go wrong with the drug, to the Canadian Armed Forces. It was the Canadian Armed Forces that recklessly disregarded the explicit instructions on the product guidelines and the stated scope of use, meaning how to use the product, where and when, and in what scope or use that product should be used for military personnel. Mm-hmm. This was not adhered to, and that was a decision made autonomously or alone by the Canadian Forces, and that's why the culpability or blame lies entirely with them and not Roche. So you might ask, well, what the hell would Canada try now to drag Roche into this for? Well, those of us advocates who have been on the scene internationally many years prior to what's going on today here in Canada know that answer. It is a simple delaying action for the Canadian government so that they can kick the can down the road, push this further down so that they can get their ducks in a row for the litigation, the legal fight that we have entered into. Mm-hmm. Most Canadians wouldn't understand that. And some Canadians might feel, yeah, bring in Roche. They gave us the bad drug. They gave the Canadian government the bad drug. And not understanding that the Canadian government was fully aware, had explicit instructions from the manufacturer. So why would they delay? The election. Election 43 was happening, was underway, was going on. And we already know the close link and ties between the brain trust that work within the Justin Trudeau, not only their prime minister's office when he was serving, when he was the incumbent, but also during the campaign later on, if not by title, and certainly in the background, those that were telling Prime Minister Trudeau and then the candidate Trudeau for the election what to do with this court case and other court cases. And that's a great segue from our court case and into what tragically has just occurred in Iran.
Great.
Mhm.
So, 2019, we have our individual tort cases, not class action. We get the response from the government. Their response is, we want to bring in Roche. This delays things. Now we got to wait till 2020 because now Roche has to get prepared. That's the delay action that the Liberal government, the current government, was looking for in conjunction, in tandem, I personally believe, with the Office of the Justice Department. And we know there's been communication back and forth with the Justice Department and the Prime Minister's office. Look what just happened with SNC-Lavalin.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Now, that's not tin hat. That's real and it's all on record. Now, we move into 2020. So what's going on? How do we move forward? Parliament is beginning to sit. Our opposition parties are, and it's bipartisan. We've got NDP support. There's emerging Green Party support, and that will come out further. Kentrina will mention what's going on there.
Mhm.
And then we everyone knows and has seen the continuous support by the Conservative Party, both during the last government, during the election, with the Andrew Scheer on the policy platform asking during the campaign for the reopening of the Somali inquiry and for the $20 million on the table for independent research to find treatment methods and an outreach program for those of us that are dealing with this. So now let's get back. Roche will do what they have to do. Parliament will be sitting. I believe Roche will quickly and successfully move themselves out of this litigation, and then we will then retrain our sights exclusively on the Canadian government. The recent tragedy in Iran has a parallel here. And there's a reason why the approach that the Iranian families, the surviving members of those families, the legal approach they're taking parallels the legal approach us mefloquine people are taking. And here's how. They're entering into a mass tort litigation. Hey, we have a mass tort litigation with mefloquine.
Mhm.
They're not going with a class action at this time as it appears. The situation, as we know, both legally and politically and others, is still unfolding. So take my information about what's happening with the Iranian legal initiative for what it's worth. I'm stating this today as we see it.
Yeah.
The Iranians have the families, the Canadian Iranian families of the departed, know they deserve their voice in court and they deserve compensation. So they're going to enter, and there's, even though the Trudeau government is offering initial compensation, and Kentrina, as I see you, please remind me to dive into that a little more, the Trudeau compensation package, please, when I end this. They're entering a mass tort or individual cases, each family, against the Ukrainian airlines for flying out of Iran. They should not have. Other airlines didn't. Ukraine Airlines made the exclusive decision to fly that day, and look what happened. It was a reckless and total disregard for safety decision. That airline should have been grounded. They continued on. Other airlines didn't. That's the crux of the lawyer's argument in the mass tort litigation, which looks like it's coming together for those Canadian Iranian families for compensation and justice. That's a matter of record. And if you notice, I did not state that they're going after Iran. No, they're going after the Ukraine Airlines. And this is important. This is a very important nuance here. They're not going after Iran, although the Trudeau government is, because Iran, as you know, is a failing state. There is absolutely no way any successful litigation will occur with an entity like that. That government right now in that country is in disarray, if you haven't noticed. Mm-hmm. And there will be no successful legal protocols or processes followed. There is no faith in that by Howie Saxon Henry, our lawyers, and a legal firm out in British Columbia, which are going to take these mass tort actions against Ukraine Airlines, not Iran, for that very reason. Because it was the Ukrainian Airlines that decided to fly, and other airlines did not. This would not have happened but for the airline making that decision. The Ukrainian-Canadian, the Canadian-Iranian families are choosing, it seems, as we see things as they unfold. And as I take it from the recent Oakley show broadcast that Paul Miller, as part of Howie Saxon Henry, has stated, as those families come and speak to him about the mass tort. They're not going with a class action. And now I'm going to go into why this is important about class actions, as I mentioned earlier, as opposed to tort or individual cases. They know they're not going class because they're limited in the settlement. They have no voice, and they have no individual control over their cases. And they will be subject in compensation to provincial standards. And those compensation packages are nowhere near enough, A, to compensate those family members for the loss of those professionals in their lives who have been tragically lost their lives and have lost their potential income. And that income from these professionals would far exceed $380,000 or less. That's not a lifetime of earnings in compensation at all. And
no.
For those family members, surviving members of the departed, the amount of care long-term from this critical incident, from this trauma, that they will have to go through in psychological services and whatnot, and the lost earnings that they themselves will occur from this in their grief and despair for years, some of them, and forever, some of them. That compensation package is nowhere near enough.
No.
And that's the parallel, and that's what applies to us, the mefloquine mass tort group. We are individually taking on the government of Canada in a mass tort because there's strength in numbers in that, but each case individual, that person can stand up and have their day in court and speak and say, no, this compensation package does not accurately reflect our lives and what we will be facing. So we are appealing. We will not accept the decision. Class action people have to take it and go.
Mm-hmm.
Allow me now to give you a parallel in class action, or sorry, recent decisions that would spotlight what I have just been blurbing on about for 3 minutes. Have a drink of your coffee.
Yeah, it's good blurbing. It's great information, and we get these questions a lot. So
exactly,
and lengthy but necessary.
Mm-hmm. And unless you're you have to really be following this, and there has to be the political knowledge, right? To even begin to wrap your head around this. So it's great to have someone come on, and explain those things, because this stuff is way above my head. So I definitely appreciate learning. Absolutely.
Yes. I mean, these are the things, the workings, the going ons that for most of us, we don't have the time to follow. We're all working. I'm retired now, permanently disabled from Quinism.
But you're still working at things.
But still working, of course.
You're working your butt off, if you ask me.
But it is the details that this long format will allow us to flesh out, to allow people to have, to fill in those gaps in knowledge. People are trying to pay the bills and go to work and care for their loved ones who require intensive care at home. Mm-hmm. They don't have time to dive 4 hours into this, and a lot of this stuff isn't 4 hours nightly.
And it still won't
Here we
make
go.
sense.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, like when you're dealing with quinism, it's still not, might not make sense, right? Quinism,
Yes.
PTSD, daily stress, focus, whatever, right?
There's
Yeah.
so much value in everybody's shared information. It's just incredible.
Mhm.
Yes.
We all learn. I've been in this just about 3 decades, and I learn something new every day. So
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
so anyway.
So here we are.
Hmm.
The recent spotlight examples of the failure for class actions, you have to look no further than the one for the sexual assault victims for those in the Canadian Armed Forces. Recently, a $900 million settlement was accepted. And for Canadians, when they hear that number, it boggles the mind. These are numbers larger than what we would ever deal with on our daily basis. $900 million. And you say to yourself, that sounds like a sizable compensation package. The Canadian Armed Forces or the government of Canada really must be serious in that compensation. That's a big number. But that's stretched out to such a great number of litigants.
Mhm.
For many of them, this amounts to $40,000 to $50,000. Pay out, see you later, out the door you go, for a lifetime of pain and suffering, and for many of them, 15 to 20 years of the trauma of the sexual assault, and then the associated traumas, such as sanctuary trauma, because they weren't being heard by the very entity that was set to protect them.
Mhm.
So sanctuary trauma, and then long-term chronic anxieties and depressions. And if you understand mental health, as many of us mental health advocates understand as we learn, once they develop these disorders and anxieties or injuries, what you want to label them, it's the associated or the next ones that come, like heart disease, say example for depression, for long-term depression, and other, say, opportunistic examples of these things. Those are the killers. The self-medication, the addiction disorders that come because of the self-medication, those are the killers.
The pharmaceuticals handed out for your depression and your
The suicidal ideation that develops and the completed suicides are the killer.
yes.
But the initial sexual assault, they survived. But so let's get back. This $50,000 slap in the face for some people who were repeatedly assaulted while in service and ignored is a slap in the face. The 900 million up front in the window looks nice.
Mhm.
Go in the store and see that. That's parceled out in such a small amount. And that's the danger of class action. They have to accept that settlement and move on.
Right.
Now, mind you, in the interest of complete transparency, for some of those victims whom have been so really, really on the spectrum affected from sexual assault, they can then, there's an avenue for increased compensation to bring them up to say 200 and some thousand. But again, for some that are permanently disabled, will never work again from the trauma.
Yeah.
200 and some odd $1,000 is nowhere near the equal to the lifetime of loss of earnings or potential, or to kind of represent or to top off the underemployment they faced over the years and will face from this whole entire situation.
They'll end up in poverty at that rate.
Yes, poverty is a real killer too.
It is.
Poverty is a very real undeclared killer, and it also leads to homelessness. Homelessness
We
leads
hear it a
to
lot, don't we?
completed suicide.
Mhm.
So, anywho, let's get to another case, and I'll sum up with this, people. A second case that we can spotlight wherein those litigants of a class action were grossly underserved in justice and compensation would be those of the residential school.
Yep.
Mhm.
Now, if you've been following that along, for the largest number of those that entered the class action for that are going to receive somewhere around $60,000 each. These children who were ripped from their homes and put into these social programs, these social engineering devices set by the current Canadian government to whitewash out of them their very culture and remove them from their families. Think on this. Are receiving $40,000 to $60,000 each. Wait a minute. The federal government would return with, well, overall, this is a number, and this is what they put in the window. this may amount from either $3 to $8 billion. And people say, wow, the federal government must be really serious in their reconciliation efforts in this area. Look at, that's a lot of money. And then Canadian taxpayers go, well, we got to pay $6 to $8 billion, 6 to maybe whatever that number, and that's now. That could go further.
It's a drop in the bucket to what they throw out to everywhere else.
That's the key. These cases, when you take a look at what's in the coffers of this federal government, and if you forward face what will be going into the coffers in the future by taxpayers, it doesn't move the national accounts meter an inch. But, excuse me, it sets precedent. They're worried about the precedent, the example they set for future cases. And that's why. So the Justice Department says and would declare, well, we have to, we have to compensate those families in a fair way. There has to be equipoise here for all involved. However, we again have to understand in this that the federal government cannot be too harmed or punitive in the financial award. They say we have to protect the federal government's coffers as a part of their decision. Again, it's ridiculous. These are two examples of class actions and the harms or pitfalls of them. You lose control individually of your case. You have to accept a settlement. These settlements are, and these mefloquine, this is a sizable number of people that are entering a mefloquine litigation. We're at 2,000, 3,000 or so. It's going to be more. A class action would not do you service. So here's what we did, and let me sum up here in this. Howie Saxon Henry, in conjunction, in tandem with Waddell Phillips, two individual legal entities in Toronto, realized that and said, we'll use you, John Dowe, and we'll make you representative plaintiff of a class action for all mefloquine sufferers, only to open up the courts and put you aside, John, on the back burner, to allow for all the mefloquine sufferers to come and do a mass tort or individual cases each, all aligned against the same entity, the Government of Canada, so that you'll get the rightful compensation and justice you deserve. That's going to be higher than the provincial standard, which won't cover you. And for those that are in the VA system, for those people that are in Veterans Affairs, many are worried, will VA have retribution in effect? If I have a successful mefloquine case, will VA take my benefits? No, they won't. We have it in writing. See Paul Miller, Howie Saxon Henry. It's on their website. Email Paul Miller at paulmiller@howiesaxonhenry. You'll see the emails all over our websites. You can gather that or see us after the show. And they will show you that in writing, VA will not affect your benefits from any successful decision or you in a court of law.
Good.
Now, but for a number of you, you want to leave VA. You want to deal with your own health. You don't want to have in writing or go through the process of acceptance and denial with VA for your claims. You want to get out of VA. A mass tort will give you the compensation enough to get you out of that system. A class action won't. You'll get, say, 50, 60, 80, 100, I don't know, from a class action, and you're still stuck with VA. The VA process, and as we know, VA is broken.
Yeah.
So the mass tort has a pro versus that con. So there's many pros to stay with the mass tort. The parallels, again, I'll sum up with the Iranian tragedy, is that they're of the understanding that they will fall into that trap of low compensation. For their own reasons, they understand. Canada is new to mass tort. They're going to, as we see as things move forward, do that. And I asked Kentrina, as I sum up, I asked Kentrina to remind me of something. Could you remind me, Kentrina, please?
Yeah, it was Trudeau's compensation pack.
Bingo.
Yeah.
So at the end, this neatly ties in with that. Prime Minister Trudeau has made the statement of $25,000 for those involved, quickly to deal with the funerals, flights, and these quick expenses that people have had. That's just the start. And of course, woefully inadequate for the expenses to come. $25,000 for a lot of you equates, if you don't know, equates to a very basic death benefit that would be provided by most jobs today. It's a quick $25,000 to deal with funerals and such, to bury the loved one. So it's not over and above or exemplary, it's just a set standard. And if the Trudeau government hadn't responded at least with this amount, then they would have looked as lacking in providing these very basics to start with. But for these families, that's nowhere near enough. And for the federal government, the Trudeau government, to start looking for a round for compensation, further compensation, these families are going to be waiting for years and years and years. Years and years. And dealing with an entity in Iran known for flouting international laws and norms and dictates when it comes to the legal and political world and their international obligations. Mm-hmm. So, rightfully, Howe Saxon Henry, that law firm downtown, the same law firm that deals with mefloquine, are taking on their cases. And here's where it's valuable to us, and here's where I finish. When they take on these cases, they're not now distracted, and now they're all fighting for the Canadian Iranian families of the departed, and only care about that, and, oh, we don't have time for the mefloquine people anymore. Nothing could be further from the truth, people. Take heart and understand. Legal firms, large legal firms, like the entities of Howe Saxon Henry and the law firm out west that are working in tandem for those Iranians, but the law firms that are dealing with us, Howe Saxon Henry and Waddell Phillips, that's a phalanx of lawyers. That's an army of lawyers. Mm-hmm. And these legal or law firms got to pay the bills in the gaps between our case and the time that we wait for the government to respond, which could take days, could take weeks, could take months. What's everybody doing at the law firm downtown in the meanwhile? Not your paperwork. Your paperwork was done prior to entering court. They got to pay the lights. They got to pay the bills. They got to pay the families. They got to pay their workers. They have to take on other cases concurrently or in the meanwhile and work those cases as well to completion or to readiness for court, and then await the court's decision on those. And they leapfrog in between cases along the way. For those of you that watch what's called serials, for those of you that watch procedurals, procedurals are these television shows, these long-form television dramas, such as LA Law or these other law shows on TV. Understand how legal firms work. They need to juggle several cases at the same time to keep the bills going. So as one case ends, another one starts, and they prioritize their time and attention to those cases where decisions are coming up, where action is required, based on the responses from the government at the moment that deals with those cases. Now, if you got that, your legal team, taking on other cases in the meanwhile, because that's how things are done in the legal world. That's how they pay the bills. You want them to take on high-profile cases, and there's no, in the meanwhile, because the high-profile cases that they take on builds a spotlight around what they do and who they are and the litigants that they serve. Mm-hmm. That all gets around in their little world of politics and law and medicine and the movers and the shakers and the entities of that world. They get to know each other in the cases they're taking. So you kind of want your law firm not to be chasing ambulances downtown.
Yeah.
You want them to be taking on those ultra high profile cases as well, so that by just proximity, they bump off and rub together. in the spotlight of the world and those that are paying attention to this, in the justice world, in the legal world, in the medical world, in the political world. Now, there's no greater case, people, as we know, than what's going on here with Iran. And as I bring this about, and as I spotlight that the world is watching what's happening with the legal part now of this tragedy, I never lose a beat for a second in my empathy and my love and my concern and compassion for those families. Okay? Anyone that has ever lost a loved one, a friend, or have been dealt a devastating blow in life has the understanding and the ability and the compassion and empathy for that. So I speak for those families in a loving way. I don't speak in an exploitive manner. I'm not exploiting the situation, and neither is our law firm. But as the world watches and awaits what's happening, so too they will learn about the mefloquine cases that our law firm is handling. And that pretty much sums that up. Kentrina, Marj, would you have anything to add to that?
Do you have anything? I just want to recap, I guess, like the message coming out of that, and I'm not gonna do it in a long way. I'm just gonna, people, there are power in numbers, and a mass tort is exactly that. In my mind, a class action, as you explained it, you're on your own. A mass tort, you're part of a large entity that it's much safer to be in. You don't have to accept the hardcore like you do in a class action, but
let me address the insurance policies and the case. If you lose your case, that's a big one. If you lose your case, do I have to pay? Okay, carry on, Marj, please. I just want to put a pin on that so I don't forget. My memory's horrible from Quinism.
say it right now. I mean, that's a good point to make, John.
Oh, say it now?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay.
And we'll probably deal with this in the questions and answers to come in a few moments, people.
Well, maybe we'll just move on then with, but because you may forget and you have a great thought.
The cases, these individual cases that are coming forward are being insured against loss. A lot of you we understand, and most people couldn't afford court costs or whatnot if they lose their case. And Howie Sexton Henry understands that. And law firms too, on their own, wouldn't be able to afford to be paying court costs for cases they lose or whatnot either. They're not dumb. They insure the case, each case. So if there's a loss, you're not going to have to pay. Your case will be insured. They go to a private entity, insurance entity, and they put out a claim. So if there's, in case of a loss for your claim, you're not going to pay. And you only pay Howie Sexton Henry when they win the case.
So
and you're only paying the same rate, the industry standard that most legal firms charge. So it's not, they're not trying to gouge. It's an industry standard rate. Just so you know. Okay.
Okay. That's awesome news to know. Go ahead,
You
Jane.
wanted to add earlier, Marj, to the political or the...
Well, I was just recapping what you said, just for people listening. Like, I know we get into it, and maybe but just to encourage people that if you're in doubt about Paul Miller and the rest of the lawyers and their integrity, and don't be. I mean, I hardly know the man other than through meeting Paul, and I'm not part of the litigation, but he still answers every text I send him. And he takes time for everybody. He's backed up Mike Rood when his service dog couldn't get in, the blue. He's following us. He's watching us. It's like having uncle over there, keeping an eye on things, but their heart's in the right place. And I find that over and over again. And I don't think anyone should be worrying about whether your case is being taken care of. And I want to say that if you're worrying about whether you should join, I think this is imperative information for you, and it just shows you have nothing to lose. Yes.
So I'll sum up now with the way forward in 2020, and we'll get into the questions and answers. To sum this up, 2019, we got the first cases in court. We got a response from the federal government. Want to drag Roche to delay. We got that. That's going to be a failing endeavor on their part, as it was in the United Kingdom at the Defense Select Committee. They soundly trounced that sort of endeavor, because Roche was upfront all along. This is on the Canadian Forces entirely. So in 2020, we expect again to have further action and response from the federal government in a little while. The election is over. Parliament is resuming. There's a bipartisan approach by the politicians, all political parties except the Liberals.
Mhm.
In the Veterans Affairs Committee, they will be addressing our concerns, our needs, and what's happening, and in tandem with the legal work. So expect to see more. Stay tuned in 2020. But for the advocates, if you haven't noticed, our advocate team grows and grows and grows. And we've seen recent additions because people are understanding.
Mhm.
In a class action, you have a representative plaintiff, meaning one person who speaks for the entire class.
Mhm.
That's not the case with mefloquine mass tort or individual cases. Each person is free to advocate for their own case. So for those of you that become activated from the news about what's happening, how it involves you, and want to do something, get off the couch. This is your avenue. This is your opportunity to do so. On Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, do Facebook Lives. If you're comfortable speaking, do so. Speak out. You're seeing our team grow and grow. And that's important because it grows in noise in social media where we can no longer be ignored. If you'll note in the news, we get an article here, we get an article there, but it doesn't last long because of the 24 hours news cycle. Everybody's distracted. So much going on out there. You can't keep the public attention. How to do so? Noise.
Mhm.
So we have lots going on. We have our annual mefloquine rally. That makes a hell of a lot of noise. And we have more individually, people out there, everyday people, speaking up and doing this and making noise digitally as well, or in the social media world. So we encourage you now to do this. If you don't know how or what to say or whatever, practice at home. Just do a video of yourself and keep practicing. You become comfortable in front of a camera. And reach out to us. We will mentor you. Marj Kentrina Jenkins, Brandon Keck, Dave Bona. There are so many advocates out there. Sean Artson, that individually speak about their cases, right? Mike Rood, and you may not be able to do a Mike Rood, speaking of him, and be able to do the tremendous outreach and awareness all across Canada nationally like he's doing. You're home with the family. We get that. Nobody is comparing advocate to advocate here.
Mhm.
You just do what you can. And together as a team, we make that amount, that exponential noise where we can no longer be ignored, and we push through the 24-hour media cycle so that large-scale public pressure begins, so that the government says, all right, shut this down, give us or give them the timely compensation and justice they deserve. Trudeau spoke when he gave that $25,000 out to these family members, and good for him for that. He spoke about the families needing this as part of the healing. A quick and timely resolution and compensation package. He's going to Iran? That message doesn't compute. How are you going to get, if Trudeau's so worried about a timely resolution compensation package, so the families move on in their healing, then we'll go bother Iran for the next 5-10 years to get it?
Yeah. And you
You
speak
have that avenue now in a timely resolution and and proper compensation in the mass tort that is readying and being finalized with Howie Saxon Henry and their teams they've teamed up with in British Columbia. So Trudeau kind of like he's speaking out of both sides of his mouth, but we're used to that, Canadians.
Yeah, we are.
But this large-scale public pressure will be achieved by all of us making noise together. Marj has her annual rally, September 19th, every year on Parliament Hill. That's a hell of a lot of noise. Mike Rood and his ongoing Rude Awakening tour, making a hell of a lot of noise. Brandon Kett, Sean Arnson, who has an associated issue with Wexit out west in Alberta, but that's separate, and he knows that. He also advocates very strongly and is very focused on his court case with mefloquine and for us advocates.
Let's throw
And
another
others.
Bruce Given, who
Bruce
took
Given.
by the horns and started having a rally to follow ours.
I'm certainly going to forget all the names, I know,
Yeah.
and I'm always forgetting those names. And so for all of you out there, I apologize. But my point is, we need more.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to give us a call or text us. We will mentor you and help you out. There are more advocates coming now, and big ones, who are like, you know what? I'm going to lend my clout. I'm going to lend my social media presence to this cause. And that's wonderful. And people like Fabian Henry, and the world should understand him. He helped to enable cannabis reimbursement policy with Veterans Affairs, so VA will pay the bill for cannabis medicine for veterans who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. That's important because lots of the symptoms that we have, not the neurological, but the psychological symptoms that we have for long-term mefloquine, can be helped with cannabis and should be helped with cannabis. And that's another episode I can get into, and I'll come back and talk on the benefits of that versus pills.
Yes.
If you have quinism or mefloquine toxicity long-term, you have acquired brain injury, you cannot take pills. It makes it worse.
So John,
cannabis is a better, more holistic approach, natural approach, and it does work, and lots of testimonials will follow that I have learned over the years and in my own user experience, and I will address that in a future show. But Fabian Henry is on board now. He wants to be on board with mefloquine advocacy. There's another bodybuilder, champion bodybuilder, former, and that's important because that takes dedication. Think of the dedication to be lifting those damn weights for years and years and years to reach the pinnacle of its success. And we have an advocate now who's coming on board, who's a successful bodybuilder and former veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces, just released. He'll be stepping forward. He'll be lending his online or his social media presence, and we need that to get the word out. And also, I'd like to mention at this time as I finish, we'll be having a rally July 1st as well. There's a rally coming and being put together to increase the noise. That's Canada Day. Everybody's on the hill around at that time, so that's a very good strategic time to be yelling and screaming for mefloquine vets then. So at that, I'll sum up with that for 2020, what we're doing as we move forward. And there's more to follow. This thing keeps evolving. I can move into the question and answer now for you guys.
Awesome. Anything you want to add, Marj, before I
just want to say, if you don't ever feel comfortable doing something in front of a camera, do not question for 1 second the power of your pen and writing a letter to your MPs, or just reach out to us and we'll give you somewhere to go for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's always we have access to so much that you can share, like I'm finding that I'm coming across all the old stuff now and I'm like, oh, this is gold, right? Like, you get caught up in all the new stuff, right? And then it's like, oh, this old stuff is
like John said, 24-hour news cycle. That's why Kentrina and I really wanted to do this, and we wanted to have a platform where, I mean, look, I don't even know what time it is. How long have we talked? And you just touched on the tips of things, John. And that point of having a longer place for people to come, and you can stop, record, go get a coffee, come back, reabsorb, start over. Exactly. That's the bonus of having this platform. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's also another great way we can interview like newer advocates as well, right? Like, so it's like you don't have to go on your Facebook Live by yourself, right? It's like, we'll take you here, and then, we can ask experiences. So.
Exactly. And what was I going to say? John, I'm glad you said that you would come back on, because I think it's important for you to keep checking in with us and keep updating people. You're trusted and they know you're in the thick of it. So, it's just good to have you come and validate information here, and we got your sense.
Thank you. Sure.
Absolutely.
You have some questions you wanted to ask?
I always have a million questions, so I'll stick to 4. So my first question, John, is what keeps you advocating, right? Like, well, there's lots of work to do, but there has to be something. Like, what keeps you doing what you do? Because, you know, when you hear, like, when I heard mefloquine, right? Like, when people led me in the direction, you know, like, you hear of John and you hear of Dave, and one of the first things John says is like, you need Marj, and, you know, right to Marj, right? So, yeah.
Okay. Well, in short, I continue and I keep advocating for veterans and RCMP and currently serving Canadian Armed Forces because I know many of you possibly suffer in confusion and silence and are stoic and don't understand what's going on. And I know how easy it is for the federal government or insurance companies like VA to snow you out of your proper compensation benefits and packages, and knowing that they have absolutely no concern about the misdiagnosis and mistreatment to occur, which is criminal. So I continue to advocate because as I began 6 years ago, I started with my own case. For those that don't know, in 2000, I was released from the Canadian Armed Forces and told I had a hereditary disease called ankylosing spondylitis. Big words. Basically means extreme and rare and early onset arthritis. Hereditary, not service related, not part of the CF, no benefits, out the door. You go. I was released. I was waiting for my sergeants. I then had to pay for very strong anti-inflammatories, Celebrex, 400 milligrams a day, for 15 years. And I was released, so I was misdiagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis and released with no benefits and on a mistreated on the wrong treatment plan, because in actuality, I had rolled a vehicle, not me, I was in the back. A driver rolled an AVGP, armored personnel carrier, a Grizzly, 130 feet down a ravine while we were serving out in Calgary. And we were all in physio for the next 4.5 months. I was spine boarded, medically evac.
Wow.
The Canadian Forces released me and told me I had arthritis so that they would not have to pay for my ongoing treatment upon release and afterward. It was an insurance policy move. That's what I learned in this process. In 2015, when I had that diagnosis stricken from the record, when I was able to prove in 2015, I was snowed for a great number of years. I believed them. I was unwitting. I suffered in confusion and silence for many years on a misdiagnosis, and I was mistreated, and it affected my physical and mental health. But the bell went off when I began to advocate for veterans, and I saw how quickly the federal government would do that. And when I had my diagnosis changed to accurately reflect that injury, a physical injury from that accident, I had a CF98 recorded accident form. When I took that back, had the misdiagnosis changed, got on the right treatment plan, my health improved, my family life improved, everything improved, and I got hope back. I was on the way to suicide. Years taking pills that were affecting my gastrointestinal, my guts and everything, and feeling physical pain every day, and it was affecting my mental health. Oh, and then in the process of that, finding out about mefloquine. I found out about mefloquine. So I knew if I was so easily snowed and released without benefits because they didn't want to pay or didn't want to be culpable for it, and released me so many years. Now, I'm the exception. I was able to prove the diagnosis wrong, and I got what was due to me. And so I never had that that diagnosis. But and then now with the mefloquine, I've seen how easy it is to snow, and they regularly do so. I won't rest. I will continue to advocate for as long as I have a breath. Now, they permanently disabled and put me on, finally, just last year, long-term disability, what's called long-term disability, a diminished earnings capacity, a DAC category. So it's finally done, and now my claim through VA is accurately reflective of my lot in life.
Good.
But for all of you out there, I will never stop. I will advocate forever for you because I know what goes on. So until VA changes, and we possibly may have a royal commission into the ongoing VA mismanagement and decision-making there, and VA and constantly concurring revolving door VA ministers that do nothing about it, then I will advocate forever. Okay, next question.
Next question. Okay, so what advice do you have for someone who just found out about Quinism or mefloquine, and they basically feel really overwhelmed with it?
My advice for all of you out there learning about mefloquine and that it may affect you is to be an autodidact. Autodidact, what does that word mean? Self-learner. Don't be afraid to start learning, no matter how long it takes. It may be complete gobbledygook at first to you as you read the literature, as you read the words of the medical and legal and political information. It might not make sense at first. It will eventually, and you have a plethora of a group of advocates out there, all doing generally the same work, but quite a few of us specifically in areas that will address or answer your questions. And we're approachable. Come to us, text us, learn where the community is, and learn about Quinism, the long-term disease of mefloquine toxicity or poisoning. Okay? If you took mefloquine and you felt bad then, and you were forced to take it and couldn't stop, you probably have permanent symptoms today. Could be neurological, tinnitus, balance, eye problems, vestibular issues, whatnot. Could be psychological, like PTSD. A lot of the things look like PTSD. If your family member or you are suffering, learn about it. Go to the reputable sites. See Dr. Remington Nevin. Seek him out. We'll have the info for you. Seek out the Quinism Foundation in Vermont and online where they exist. Those are the top experts. Always refer to the top experts. Even if you get information from us advocates, we might trip up. Always refer to the final decision and take that stuff to your doctor or the doctor treating your husband or your spouse or partner. Take the top information that you think is part of what involves you or what you're seeing going on in your partner to your general practitioner, your family doctors, and say, hey, I'm concerned because my partner or spouse seems to have this problem, and these guys say this is what it might be. LifeMark. Learn about that entity. LifeMark is a health group that provides health and information and assessment, takes you in and assesses you for neuropathies or neurological problems, balance, dizziness, or whatnot, that might tease out what might be mefloquine problems and what is not PTSD, because PTSD doesn't have that. I earlier mentioned some things of PTSD look like mefloquine toxicity long-term. They can tease out, figure out what is actually mefloquine. LifeMark is an entity, has 175 locations in Canada. So seek the expert advice as you now learn about this from us, the advocates, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We have communities. There's Veteran House. There's Veterans for Healing. There's Partners for Mefloquine Awareness, such as what Kentrina runs. There's Marj matching all the individual advocates that will answer your questions. So learn. If you first find out about Quinism, learn. And know there's hope. We're all fighting for you. Next question.
Awesome.
Oh, sorry. To finish.
Yeah, what I was actually just going to add two things on that one.
Don't rely upon 1, 2, or 3 sources. Take it all in and talk to your doctor. And don't just take in the short clips. Don't just take in the 3 to 5 minute Facebook Lives or Twitter entries or video posts. Come to these long form broadcasts so that you can come back and we can spend the time to really broaden out each of these topics that apply. It takes a long form. Be patient. Like we said earlier, have a coffee, pause when needed, just pause the video. But these are vital, these long-form formats to really teach you about this stuff. Sorry, go ahead.
Absolutely. And so 2 of the things that John kind of like triggered in me is with Veterans House, there is a new letter that did come out that, we talked about in one of our previous videos. So it's a letter from a psychologist that explains Quinism. And there's even one of Dr. Nevin's whole chapters in that as well. So we'll put that information down below on how to get that letter to print out. And with LifeMark Physiotherapy, I do have the contact information that I can help anyone in Canada find a location that has a vestibular therapist that would do the testing as well. So, and then, so that leads me to my, okay, let's see. So 3rd question. So what's the best way that a spouse or family member can support someone that has Quinism or?
First off, bring your bucket of compassion and understanding. Dealing with a person who has Quinism, long-term mefloquine problems, may be commingled or comorbid, meaning may have also PTSD or other issues together. And that makes for a daily struggle. And that daily struggle wears you down. And I know personally in my family, I appear to be fully functioning and getting on with life and all that. I'm only that way because I put everything together, all the spokes on the wheel of my overall health, my holistic approach in great nutrition, great support around me, communication skills, exercise, no fast foods, no alcohol or hard drugs and such. So, and over the years, I've kind of improved somewhat. Some of the capacities have returned. Some of the mental capacities of being able to try to fight back my Quin spin or Quinism rage or inability to rationalize the situation for what it is and going off the rails and not being able to bring myself back down or isolating myself away from everyone because I didn't trust myself in situations and didn't want to disappoint the family. Listen, bring a bucket, for those of you dealing with this, of compassion and understanding and empathy. That person struggling with Quinism alone, and it's a spectrum. Some people have a little bit, some people have a lot. Quinism is a spectrum, just like PTSD. Some have a little PTSD, some have a lot. Some, every day, if they don't explicitly follow their routine, they're off the rails. Some, if they don't follow their routine weekly, they begin to go off the rails. Have an understanding and compassion for that. They're not trying to fail you on purpose. They're struggling with a mental health disease. And it's hidden. It's hidden. So it's not a broken arm or whatnot that you can quickly look at and go, oh, right. No, they're just being a jerk that day, you think. And even as part of your understanding of someone with Quinism and PTSD or both together, which makes things even harder, as you can imagine, understand that they're trying. So just do the best you can to understand the situation, but also have a keen eye that they're not indulging in their problems, that they're not just trying not to be accountable for them, and they're not just being a jerk. And it's okay for someone to be a jerk for a day. Everybody has a bad day. So have the understanding and the keen insight that they might be just having a bad day, or they could be really, struggling with what's going on. And for the most part, if you know their character, they're not doing it on purpose. So that's one thing I would tell people who are dealing with this daily. And 2, to learn more about it. And 3, to join communities and speak to each other and use your voice and don't have a stigma. Talk to each other in an open and transparent way, because people may be able to help you or at least explain to you what's going on at home and why it's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps, because once you start to get answers, then you can start to find a path forward.
Yes, I agree. Totally.
Absolutely. And that leads us perfectly into my last statement. So we always try to end the episode with the message of hope. So what's your message of hope that you kind of want to get out?
First off, my message of hope is look around. Look at all those mefloquine warriors. Look at the mefloquine advocates, not only on what's going on here in Canada, because for most of you, you're following the Canadian and you're new to this Canadian experience of mefloquine advocacy. But there's been a whole host of activity, and there's a whole group of experts internationally in the Commonwealth countries, but also in the United States and other countries that have been dealing with this, that have advocated and have victories. There are templates that we can use, examples, both legally and parliamentary to change policy, that helps us along. We're not alone. And there's a whole bunch of experts that we can rely upon that will give us the information at the stages that we are at here in Canada on what to do and the best way forward and what they did, and are able and willing to mentor us to ensure success. As my co-founding partner of the International Mefloquine Veterans Alliance, Stuart McCarthy, stated earlier, those victories that are achieved by the international advocates are passed along to the individual countries willingly and happily, so that we achieve our victory. And we're very close.
I agree.
We're very close. The timeline of mefloquine advocacy in Canada, from start to finish, we're almost closing in on the finish. It's accelerated, very vastly accelerated here in Canada because of that earlier work internationally and abroad. Canada is one of the last holdouts, and they were always a holdout because to begin to deal with mefloquine, you have to open the Pandora's box of the illegal drug trial in Somalia and what had occurred in the Somalia affair.
And we're going to talk
about
that.
An illegal drug trial to begin with, to get mefloquine on the market. It affected the tour. It brought about the Somalia affair, Marj. It brought about the incident with your husband and what had occurred, and that tragedy, and other events, not just that one in Somalia, that were suppressed. That were suppressed. And the evidence that came out, the evidence for trials and inquiries that was suppressed by the government of the day, was suppressed from the Canadian public at large. That's why Canada is the final holdout. But because of the legal action, we're all in process. So the message of hope is we're in the courts. We have the best lawyers, and we know we've got the best lawyers based on their experience. And again, the parallel with the Canadian Iranian, and the tragedy from Iran blasting out their own airline in their airspace, and doing that, and now these family members, surviving members, approaching Howie, Sex, and Henry, and Paul Miller, our main man, quarterbacking the mefloquine lawsuits. That's a message of hope.
It is.
We are learning more about mefloquine, on how to dealing with it, how to draw what's mefloquine and what's not, to get the proper treatment so that you guys can get better. And so for you out there, your husbands, your wives, your partners, you can start to follow along in our pattern of healing. And you can get greater functionality. You can expect greater functionality from your partner as they change the way they live their life. So too will they change their health outcome. There will be a betterment of health outcomes for the family, And for that person, if you listen to us, there is hope.
Absolutely. Well, people, we're gonna find. I'm still all baffled here, guys. But this is good. This is your episode of We Got Your Six, and we're going to post on our website all the information about how to contact the law firms and how to contact. You can inbox John. You could do that for, personally, any one of us would answer you and point you in the right direction. That's John's message of hope. There's a whole community, a whole world out here. You're not alone. We're global, and you could just reach out from any corner of the world. Earl, yes. Oh, what is that?
That's a hammer. The hammer of justice has been employed for
like
mefloquine.
Yes, it has. Oh, perfect. I like that little hammer. Take care of each other out there. This has been We Got Your Six. So we'll see you next time.
And thank you so much, John, for coming. We appreciate it.
Cheers, everyone. I can't wait to explore more of these topics and further on this broadcast. This show is wonderful. And thank you for beginning this long form format, which is muchly needed for the mefloquine families out there.
Awesome.
Well, we appreciate that so much, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.